Seems fair to me.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Welcome back to Donnybrook. Happy Halloween. Let's meet the panelists. Wendy Wiese, who for the last time will be introduced as part of the Big 550 KTRS. Will explain that. She's retiring, and one of our topics this week, Wendy. Serious journalist Bill McClellan, who is back from regions unknown after a three-week absence. He's with the Post-Dispatch. Sarah Fenske, executive editor of St. Louis Magazine, STLmag.com, and from the St. Louis American, editor and sports columnist Alvin Reid. Okay, we've got lots of topics. Let's get to them. Let's start with you, Sarah. Lyle Carsenby, the CEO of Emerson, for the second time in about a year, exhorted St. Louis leaders to kind of get off the couch and get moving. He wants civic-private partnerships to really enhance and push this community along. He said that Emerson, a Fortune 500 company, had the opportunity to move to any number of cities, but his daughter kind of encouraged him to stay in St. Louis, and he said the data supported that. He said he wants other business leaders to get involved, but in a way, aren't business leaders already involved with Greater St. Louis Inc. and all that Taylor money and all the work that's been done fixing the Arch Grounds, Ballpark Village, Washington Avenue, Union Stations, the list goes on and on. People are doing a lot already in this town, are they not?
I mean, it's hard to argue with that when you put it that way. But, you know, I think he was saying we can do more, and we as business leaders should do more. And he had a great example. It made me really kind of admire the guy. You know, when he called on business leaders to do more about a year ago, after that, he ended up having regular meetings with Police Chief Tracy, you know, really sort of like rolling up his sleeves and working on some of these initiatives that he cares about. And I think you can never have too many citizens willing to pitch in. It was nice to read this interview. It was nice to read that, you know, he felt like they'd made the right choice by staying rather than just, you know, hey, we're done. Things don't work here.
Well, it sounded to me like the old civic progress days.
Exactly.
And in days when the companies were owned in St. Louis, you know, before we and everybody else in the country became branch office towns. Yeah. And there was something good about that. I remember when Ross and Purina saved the Blues when they were about to leave. It's any businessman who wants to step forward and say, let's do more, and does himself. It's a great thing.
You actually stole exactly what I was going to say, because 1977, Alvin, who is with us tonight,
in every
remembers that the downtown that I grew up in was bustling, and you went and saw Christmas lights, and you did, you know, all that. And part of it was an entity that I couldn't stand, which was Civic Progress.
Why?
I never understood that.
You and Ray Hartman were always after Civic Progress.
Let me finish. I'm just saying that this was, I looked at it like, okay, it's the 70s, remember, you know, and coming out of the 60s, and, you know, these powerful, rich
white
business
guys, you can say it,
standing in the way of my progress, you know, as a person. But I was ignoring the fact that they were doing great things for the city of St. Louis, and that's needed. And I think that it is still possible for CEOs of companies, regardless if we're branch towns now and whatnot, to stand up and say, like, and it doesn't have to be through Greater St. Louis Inc. It doesn't have to be like, hey, 5, 10 of you all get together and say, like, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it.
Right. The one thing we don't have now is the brewery. I mean, you know, the brewery was the big mother pig. I mean, everybody was nestling up to the brewery for everything.
Right. But we have had people stepping up, whether it's Robert and Steve O'Loughlin, or the late Michael Nydorf, or Bob Clark, or
they didn't have the stature of the brewery, though.
No. It's hard to say that, but Centene's actually a larger company.
All right.
I mean,
do you think, and I do, do you think, never mind Greater St. Louis Inc. asking, like, you know, we think this money for that you got from the ramp should go to, if the most powerful people said, like, we're going to make downtown secure, we're going to make downtown secure in 6 months, and this is how we're going to do it, and anybody who doesn't get with this, A, won't be working here, or won't get elected, or we are going to use our weight.
But I think it is a different world. Civic Progress didn't have to deal with all the social media platforms, everything in real
I don't think that
Ignore it.
Well, I mean, it is a different world. They would have, I don't know that they would have survived, some of them,
maybe,
if they didn't play ball. I don't think that I think that if you are a civic leader in 2024 in St. Louis, I'm sure that once upon a time it would have been, hey, who does this young Emerson upstart think he is? I don't think we have that anymore. I really don't.
Well,
here's
what we don't have, and that is Jeff City. You know, when we built the stadium, we had John Ashcroft behind us. This week in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a $700 million plan to refurbish downtown Pittsburgh was announced. And the governor there, Josh Shapiro, is one of the people. But they said we're also going to have businesses, unions, artists. They named, you know, everybody is going to be on board for this. Shovel-ready projects, it's going to be done by 2028. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
And that, now, would we be able to do something like that today without Jeff City? Would Jeff City throw in some $100 million? I don't know.
I think if our top business owners and operators, because like you said, I know that they're not the CEOs of the entire company, but if they went there and said, like, look here, dude, seriously, and GSL, you know, Inc. Endorsed Kehoe over the rest of the multitude he was running against, go talk to him seriously.
Maybe.
Say, like, how about do you want to be governor?
Well,
one term?
Speaking of which, what do you think, Alvin, of some business leaders, including Richard Chaffetz, who's of Chicago, but he's a SLU grad, and he's been very generous with St. Louis University. The arena is named after him, along with the Hoffman family from real estate. And then Jason Tatum, gold medal winning basketball pro with the world champion Boston Celtics. They've announced that they would like to bring the WNBA to St. Louis. But that probably is not going to be done without public money. Do you think public money should be spent on that?
Well, you know, I pick and choose the projects that I say. And while I supported Kansas City kind of on the World Cup, I don't know. I mean, put it this way. If we landed a WNBA franchise and they needed some upgrades, although they would probably play in Chaffetz, I don't know why any money is really needed other than to bribe maybe the people making the decision. But the problem here is, once again, on the other side of the state, Patrick Mahomes has announced that he's the one that would like to see the WNBA there, and right now, Kansas City is packing a bigger punch than we are. And look, I love Jason Tatum. I love that he loves St. Louis, but right now, Patrick Mahomes is one of the biggest things going on in this nation.
I think Tatum is just as big in his respective arena, and we're dealing with the WNBA here, where I think 60% of that league is owned by the NBA.
Really more
they have every reason to make Jason Tatum happy. I think that's going to go great for us. And while I understand Kansas City has been getting better press than St. Louis lately, I don't know that that's fully deserved. I think they're struggling with a lot of our same problems. They've had some crime issues there that actually don't compare favorably to what's happening in St. Louis. They've been struggling in some key ways. I think if people look closely at these things,
and they're still not as big as us. They're still not as big.
Exactly. As a metro area,
I think
as a metro area.
I think it's like a teeter-totter here in the state of Missouri, because when we were growing up, it was very much Kansas City
laughed at.
I mean, seriously laughed at them.
I still feel that way.
Yeah, well, when you go over there, you don't feel that way for long, because they've built out from the downtown area. They've done it in a very measured, brilliant way. And this is their time to be up in the air.
And I'll give you a case in point, because it's now been, I guess, 3 years since it officially opened. But they decided we got to redo this airport, okay? And the mayor said, I'm running on re-election on doing the airport.
Right.
And he won re-election, and they're finished with the airport, and it's still way out in the middle of nowhere. But
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful, and it's done, and it took them like 3 years.
But here's the thing. We are in the works of doing the same thing. We are going to fix our airport. We're going to have a single terminal. They're working hard on this. It's moving forward. They've gotten all the sign-offs. I think sometimes we forget that if we looked at ourselves the way that other people look at Kansas City, we're actually doing okay by many of the same metrics.
But it's taken us 10 years to do something. It took them 3. I mean, it's just, that's our story. Like you say, shovel ready. Let's do it. Let's pick one project at a time and get it done.
I will say St. Louis has a far superior airport in terms of nonstops. I think we've got about 80 nonstops, and Kansas City has about 35 or so, last count. So let's move on to another topic, Bill. It turns out that the New York Times took a look at Republicans who are putting these messages, they're projecting lighted messages on the side of water towers. The New York Times looked at Hanson, Missouri, and these are kind of like pro-Trump, pro-J.D. Vance messages, but it's happened also in our St. Louis area, in Arnold and in O'Fallon. What do you think about some guy supporting Donald Trump projecting in, with light, Trump Vance on the side of a public water tower?
Well, I think the public ought to be able to charge the guy or charge the campaign. You know, I'm not sure about criminalizing it and saying, you know, we're going to arrest the guy, but I would say that if you want to use our water tower to support a candidate, fine, but, you know, here's our fees.
Yeah, but my fee in taxes pays for the water tower, and I don't want any message up there. Republican, Democrat, go Chiefs, whatever. I'm like, no, it's public property.
Well, the only one that I think is important, Alvin, is you go down 44 when you hit Bourbon, and there's that big water tower that says Bourbon. I mean that's like a tourist attraction. I mean, really, everybody who goes by it comments on it.
Because
so I wouldn't want, you know, that marred with a political thing. But a normal water tower, if somebody wants to pay to project a message.
Well, but what's the difference between projecting a message on the side of a water tower and standing on the, let's say, the Tam Avenue overpass on 6440 with a sign? You're basically just interrupting somebody's view in both cases. In the case with regard to the projecting the image, think about it. You're not tearing down a tree to create a sign. You're not filling a landfill with the sign when the election's over. You're only doing it at night, not during the day.
But what about Alvin's point that this is taxpayer? This is a taxpayer.
So is the Tam Avenue overpass. We don't charge people for standing on a sidewalk.
We don't allow people to just camp out at the Tam Avenue overpass. People are briefly there. They tell them to move along. The next group comes up with some totally different message. They tell them to move along.
Can I mow Harris on the City Hall lawn in Kirkwood? I mean, it's public property.
That would actually be physically altering it, but you're not physically altering the water tower when you shine a light on it.
But you're using public property for a private
political
purpose.
Right.
And I think if the community wants to raise some money, they can do it.
And Arnold and O'Fallon are not Democratic hotbeds, I'm pretty sure. And if their city government stood up and said, like, no, you can't do this, they're on my side in that, no, you can't do this, not because we're going to vote for Trump too, but because you can't do that, because there's people here that pay taxes that don't want it used for that reason.
Are you sure you're just not living in the past and not used to the future, which is here now? Okay. People are projecting images all over, you know, like on the sides of churches, for example. We've done that throughout St. Louis for celebration. The Missouri Botanical Garden at Christmas.
Well, I'm in the past, and I remember when you'd drive down the highway and there'd be a sign on a barn, you know, Merrimack Cavern straight ahead, and that farmer's getting paid for it.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying. If you want to use property, you should have to pay for it.
Chris's grandfather owned an 850-acre dairy farm in Webster County, and when I met him, the corn silo still had "We Like Ike"
Oh, wow.
on the side of it. So you're right. We do like to live in the past. I mean, right?
I'm
Memory Lane is our favorite street.
Don't get me started on the advantage of the 20th century.
Sarah Fenske, let me ask you about Cara Spencer, who was a member of the St. Louis Development Corporation until she resigned this week. St. Louis Development Corporation has been doling out federal funds, but sometimes to politically connected families in questionable ways, as well as granting dollars to vacant lots and people who are in Shrewsbury, not the city of St. Louis. Austin Hugelet of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reports that some checks were sent out to organizations that don't seem to exist. Well, she has quit, saying she couldn't put up with the way it was run by Neil Richardson, the head of the SLDC. But since she was there when all the trouble occurred, are her hands really clean on this?
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer that question. I don't know what she knew and haven't scrutinized specific votes. I did ask her, I said, you know, isn't your job, if you're concerned about what's going on here, shouldn't you stay on this board so that you can advocate for things to be done differently and be that voice of opposition that she herself has said, you know, she feels like it's lacking. And she had an answer to this where she said she feels like she got no more information than a member of the public would get as she was serving on this board, and yet they expected her to sign off on things that she just didn't have enough information to do that. It didn't feel right. She said she thought the most ethical thing she could do is say, I cannot give this my blessing.
Well, on the Business Journal story, I think the second word was mayoral candidate, and I think that's what this is about. You can't use this as a, you know, a political, you know, issue with the mayor if you're on the board. So because everybody said, like, well, you're on the board. And then second, if somebody on the school board, you know, beleaguered school board, St. Louis Public Schools, resigned right now and just basically said, like, oh, I just couldn't take it anymore, the way how things were done and blah this and blah that, we'd all say, like, you were sitting there when this woman was hired and she hired all her friends and cronies and all that. You can't just leave that behind by saying, like, okay, I don't want any more part of that. So I think this is driven by the fact that she's running for mayor. I've got concerns over that whole thing, so I'm sure she does too, but I think this is really forged in mayoral.
Well, I can't argue with what Alvin's saying there. Obviously, the fact she's running for mayor is driving this. And you can see how if she were to stick around on this board and just vote against these things, well, then that could lead to an attack ad against her. She's the one stopping this progress. You know, she, you know, voted against grants for North City businesses. She's kind of in a can't-win situation here. You can see how she gets to the point she got.
Right. I think she has to leave. I mean, if she's going to use this as a campaign issue, and it's a good one, she can't very well be accused of she's the one stopping progress. She, you know, so she has to leave.
Yeah, but I agree with you guys. I think that the timing though really is everything. And if it could, if all of this could have happened maybe a few months ago or a month ago even, before things started having big giant, you know.
And I'll admit that in a second. Oh yeah, if in May she had just said, like, okay, I'm not on this board anymore, wouldn't have paid it any attention whatsoever.
But now that you got a fire.
Yeah, right. Well, and what, the primary's in March? I mean, that's
it's coming out.
Well, but it's now that we're seeing where the money's going.
Right.
Austin Hugelet has done a great job on
Absolutely.
that.
True.
Well, Sarah brings up a good point, though, because it's not clear that she'll be able to be replaced, because the charter for the SLDC says she's there because she's the chairperson of a certain committee on the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis. Now, who's going to replace her? And if she's not there, who's going to be the loyal opposition or bring up the points that she thinks are cogent?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a complicated situation, and I think her leaving doesn't really solve things, except in some ways it does solve her particular unique set of problems. But the city still has to deal with this. One of the things that she pointed out in her letter resigning, she thinks it's a conflict for Neil Richardson to be both the CEO and the chair of the board. Yeah, and she's right in that a typical nonprofit structure, you have a chairman of the board who's kind of supervising the director, who's doing the day-to-day work. You know, Otis Williams, who's the former director of the SLDC, he says that he talked to Mayor Jones and, you know, before this structure was implemented and advised her against it. It might be one of the reasons we're in the jam we're in.
Right. Now, didn't the members vote him into that second?
They did. The members absolutely
And she could have voiced concern at that time, too.
Right. And, yeah, I think plenty of people could have spoke up, didn't, and now this you know, the wheels are turning.
Wendy, what do you make of someone in Lindenwood Park, neighborhood of the city of St. Louis, writing notes on cars, or putting on the windshields of cars for people who have expired temporary tags or no license plates? And the notes, in pretty bad penmanship, say something like, you have to get permanent license plates. This is your final warning. Well, the note was one thing, but those cars ended up being vandalized. Someone slit all 4 tires on those vehicles recently, as reported in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and elsewhere. And I guess because there are so many cars out there that are not registered, do you have a little bit of sympathy for this vigilante?
Is it wrong that I kind of, you know, you envision, is this person, whether it's a male or a female, do they wear a cape? You know, do they have a horse? You know, or is it a scooter? You know, like, how do they do it? Yes, I absolutely, because it has become one of our favorite sports in this city to look at, hey, do you see that tag? That's 4 years old. I mean, it's just, it's out of control. And so is there a little tiny bit of sympathy? Yeah, there really is. And I would not want to have my tire punctured. And I do feel for the people who are Mr. Vigilante. You cannot take things into your own hands, as it must feel really good, though.
Well,
for just a
Charlie, of course, and I'm not accusing anybody.
No, I know.
of anything, or asking
I think we know
where you were on those nights. But you have been the loudest voice, Charlie, about
You are
condemning
Mr.
these people
Temporary
and
tag.
pointing them out and taking pictures of them. So I hope you have some sympathy.
My attorney, Al Watkins, and I will be defending this. You know, the vigilante should not be slashing tires.
No.
But I was surprised that the police said that they're looking for the vigilante, but there was no mention in any story that they were ticketing or fining or punishing the people whose license plates were not up to date.
All right,
Well, I think they were punished enough if their Ford tires were slashed.
Yeah,
and you
punctured.
That's just the beginning. The punishment I see.
How do you know?
How do you know? Right.
That sounded like a threat.
I'm going to peruse to see which retailer hasn't paid their taxes this year, and I'm just going to walk in and steal. Right? He's like, hey,
Take
I'm
the
teach you a
microwave.
lesson.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, you know, the crime victim calls the cops, and the cops go, well, we ran some warrants, and now we're coming after you. They can't do that. I have no sympathy for this vigilante. I'm sorry, Charlie. Whatever you do after hours, it's
your
none of my
business.
business. But
We support you.
I think it's horrible. How do we allow ourselves to get so wound up by something that is not directly injuring us that we would go around and, like, destroy someone's ability to have transit? It just seems dreadful.
It's
there is a
terrible,
certain-
but you know, the people who, the excuses for not having the plates were pretty wobbly. One said, well, I was waiting for some repairs. What? You're waiting for repairs to register your car? When you're not registering your car, it often means you're driving without insurance, that the car can be stolen and it can't be identified.
See, the vigilante has listened to this spiel.
Well, that's possible. That did occur to me. But you're not paying your taxes, which would fix the potholes in the street. That's got to appeal to one of you.
So you're saying they are scufflaws.
Scufflaws.
They are indeed.
Right.
Yes,
Well,
scufflaws.
I will say that maybe 10 years after 1977, Alvin, 1987, Alvin probably needed to get his brakes fixed to pass the inspection and rode dirty a while he saved the money so he could get his brakes fixed so he could then pass the inspection. And yes, the tag was probably expired. So there are some people that's the truth.
Yes, it does happen. But you do, I mean, there's a certain amount of panache. You know, you have been warned.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of stylish.
And I don't
it's also incredibly illegal.
But I don't want this to happen. But if I do walk up on somebody's, you know, punctured my tire because my tag is, you know, and I gun them down.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's like, hey, I thought he was going to tag me with
Hold that thought. We got the 2-minute warning, and we learned this week that Wendy Wiese, after 41 great years in St. Louis radio, is hanging up the microphone tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, your last broadcast on KTRS, the Big 550, is tomorrow between 10 and noon. Yeah. Say it ain't so.
It is so. It is so, and I am so grateful to my friend Sarah and Jacob Kern and Joe Holloman, and obviously you, Charlie, because you were there, and Bill and the alien who has replaced the Cat in the Hat, and Alvin from 1977 for kind of keeping this on the down, you know, on the down low for me. But yeah, it's a great time in life, and you know, we sort of grow up hearing people say that, you know, the time is just right, and that is exactly how this feels. So
you've had a tremendous career.
Well, you're staying on Donnybrook, though.
Unfortunately, for the viewers of Donnybrook, yes, I will still be on Donnybrook.
Well, I've been asked that probably 20 times since the announcement was made. And so like, it actually did say in the story, everyone, that she is staying. But yes, she's staying. So I'm very happy about that. And I was happy to help you out the times that I did. And I'm sure sure your
wonderful
listeners
partner.
will miss you, I guess.
For sure.
Well, I will miss them. I will miss them. But this is a good time to go. And Jill Farmer will be taking my place on Monday, and love her to death. And I adore Frank Cusimano. So I'm leaving the show in good hands.
Anything special that we should know about tomorrow?
I have no idea. Frank Cusimano has been the wedding planner here. He's been taking care of everything, so I just sort of show up, and I'm surprised, as I was the day you walked in the studio, or Bob Costas called, or Dan Deerdorf today.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, who knows? It's been wonderful, and I'm very, very grateful.
Oh, well.
Very grateful.
Godspeed, and glad she is staying with us. Wendy will still be on Donnybrook.
Thank you.
Let's first go to the old mailbag and see what people had to say about last week's show. Wouldn't it improve North City by bringing in a Schnucks or Deerbergs? It would solve two big problems: provide a needed grocer to the area and provide jobs to the area. That from Richard Bay of St. Louis, Missouri. Patty Smith of Kirkwood wrote, the panelists discussed coming up with the money to improve infrastructure, including bus service and Metrolink, to impress the World Cup attendees. And yet, we cannot provide proper transportation for our St. Louis school children. That from Ms. Smith of Kirkwood. You could write us care of PBS 63108. We love those emails, Donnybrook at 9pbs.org. On social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line, 314-512-9094, and listen to us on your favorite podcast source. Thank you so much for joining us. But before we go, a little toast to 41 great years of St. Louis radio and our colleagues.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Do you congratulate somebody, Wendy?
Yes.
All right, congratulations.
Congratulations, guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, my goodness.
Yummy.
Oh.
And a happy Halloween to everybody.
That's right. And be careful, because we'll be driving home soon.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
Yes.
it's a good thing that they put apple cider
That
in
is
these,
sparkling
long
apple
flutes.
cider.
But I will say, I know how much work it is. And Sarah does too. Alvin, you did a lot of radio back in your day. And with, I think, 40 seconds to go, I think, Wendy, you're going to find a big relief when you're no longer having to feed the monster 5 days a week.
That's what you said, and I never forgot it. You said that it's very difficult to generate that much content. So I'm.
My favorite story is when you said you had a meeting with Bob Hyland and you took your coat off and he said, like, you aren't going to be here that long. Remember that story? Not career, but just for that.
So many stories. So many stories.
That's it. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everybody.
Guys.
Good night. Happy Halloween.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.